Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. If this is your first time joining us, each week when you tune in, you'll hear one of two different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear an interview style show where we have on someone associated with the land development industry. We listen to their origin story, and then we learn more about some of the projects that they've worked on over the years. Then other times when you tune in, you have industry news, like today, where we pull up a few different headlines and we talk about what it means for the industry. And joining me, as always, on these industry news episodes is Charles Covey. Charles, how's it going?
Hey.
So we're recording this right after Thanksgiving. So hopefully all of you listening in had a great Thanksgiving and time to reflect on all that you're grateful for. Charles, how was your Thanksgiving?
It's great. Got to see some family, got to hang out. I'm an uncle now, so my brother has 4 kids, so I like to play with them. It's a good time.
Nice. Yeah, we had a house full here. First time we had, I think, 20 people in the house plus a dog running around, and a lot of kids. I think of the 20, I want to say 8 were kids. So we had we definitely had a house full. We managed.
Nice.
The house is still here, and we're all good and stuff. But yeah, it was good to be around family. And as you get older and older, it feels like it's at times it can be more difficult or harder for everybody to get together because of a lot of the kids' activities they have going on, or
Right.
school and all those things. So yeah, it definitely was a good time for sure.
Good deal.
Well, today we've had some activity happen over the last week, and so I know when I had this episode put together here, we had to change it a couple of times because new things came out, and we want to make sure that the articles that we're covering are timely and that they're helpful for all of you listening in and everything. And so one of the first things that we're going to cover here today is related to, well, a couple of them, I guess, are related to the president-elect, to Donald Trump, and one related to an appointment and one related to something he announced on Truth Social. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first headline comes to us from Truth Social. It's not really a headline, more so, I guess, a summary of what he said on Truth Social, and then we'll look at what he actually said. So this says Trump announces plan to impose a 25% tariff on all goods coming from Mexico and Canada, and an additional 10% tariff on goods coming from China. So reading from Trump directly, there were a bunch of articles on this, but I wanted to go directly to what Trump said, so that way we can interpret it and see what it could mean for the housing industry. So the first post that he made was, I've had many talks with China about the massive amounts of drugs, in particular fentanyl, being sent into the United States, but to no avail. Representatives of China told me that they would institute their maximum penalty, that of death, for any drug dealers caught doing this, but unfortunately, they never followed through, and drugs are pouring into our country, mostly through Mexico, at levels never seen before. Until such time as they stop, we will be charging China an additional 10% tariff above any additional tariffs on all of their many products coming into the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter. He then goes on to continue related to Mexico and Canada. As everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. Right now, a caravan coming from Mexico, composed of thousands of people, seems to be unstoppable in its quest to come through our currently open border. On January 20th, as one of my first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long-simmering problem. We hereby demand that they use this power, and until such time that they do, it is time for them to pay a very big price. So obviously, two different posts here, both related to tariffs, both related to he's using the drug problems that we have coming across the border, and then also illegal immigrants coming into the country as his reason for imposing the tariffs. What are your initial thoughts when you see this? You've got you've got China, which he's long spoken about China and everything, and then you have Mexico and Canada with a pretty big number there in 25%.
25% is high. So let's look at the numbers. China imports around a half a trillion every year to us, so around 500, 500 or so, 550 billion. So you think, oh, 25, that's tough. Then you do the actual math. So we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. This is this is serious stuff. And so I think that kind of what you and I have talked about before, I don't think that 25% to for Mexican goods is a smart move for the US. We need those things coming in. They can make them cheaper than us. They're an ally close by. That makes sense to be more of a partner. That's kind of why NAFTA and some of these other things were created. So my gut feeling on Mexico and Canada is that those are more threatening tariffs that will get negotiated down. I know that Trump just met with the Mexican president at the end of the week, and supposedly they had a good conversation. So if you're the Mexican president, you're freaking out because 25% tariff is very damaging. So they're going to do what's necessary to get their stuff in order. And I think that number probably comes down. The China number is not all bad. I think some of that is probably good for the US in the long term. Probably hurts a little bit in the near term, but as we can get if we can work the things out with Mexico and Canada like I think we can, and we're already in the process of reshoring a lot of things. Post COVID, a lot of things were starting to be reshored to the US anyway, and to Mexico. So I think we can really focus on that relationship with Mexico and Canada. I think the Chinese tariff can stay high, and that's probably still a good thing for us. Generally speaking, it's going to take cost of goods up. And we talked about this, I think we talked about this last time. It will take cost of goods up. That's kind of the point. But then the taxpayer is paying less in taxes, and that's the offset. So the tariffs, it really is it's a one-sided conversation until we know. It's like accounting entries, right? You can't talk about an accounting entry just have one side of the entry. You've got to have the opposite entry that goes with it. And so without knowing what the tax plan is, it's really hard for us to analyze the tariffs at all. Because is this too high? Is it too low? Is it, what is it? I don't know. What's the offset going to be on the backside? So that's the part of the part of the equation I still don't have good information on yet.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. I mean, I know you've talked about that before, that maybe there will end up being enough of an offset where the tariff doesn't truly hurt as badly as it may seem. But yeah, up to this point, I think any changes to the tax code it's going to be much different. I don't think it's going to be an executive order that he's going to sign in on his first day in office or anything like that. So there's going to be much more scrutiny on that, and it's going to have to get support from both sides of the aisle for any of that. So it could be a much longer thing. So it feels like the tariffs are going to be in place before anything changes with the tax code or with any, reduction in tax. So what does that end up looking like? And I like your take on, maybe this, especially for Mexico and Canada, maybe it was more so a threat of imposing that. And just, I think that's one of the things that, people say with Trump is that, I don't know if you'd call him like a wild man, but he does things that I think other people won't do. And if they try to call him on his bluff, he will impose it. Like he's not going to walk away from it. And I think the fact that he has that mindset and he has that track record too, for the 4 years that he was the president, I think
Certainly.
that can definitely cause, the Mexican president, or even in Canada, the prime minister in Canada, to want to take some sort of action that will, appease the U.S. and make sure that they're doing what's necessary to help with the things that President Trump has called out in here. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I didn't know that he had met with the Mexican president. So the fact that that's already happened post, following him making this post, because this happened at the beginning of the Thanksgiving week, and then he ended up meeting with the president toward the end of that week.
Right. That is not coincidental at all. I think that meeting happened, because Mexico needed to have some answers like, okay, what does this really mean? And what can we do to fix it? Right.
Yeah.
25% the problem for them. So yeah, I think that's probably all going the direction that it needs to. Now, it looks like Canada is, at least from the Canadians that I know, they're absolutely fed up with Trudeau and his regime and the wokeness and all that it's just crushing that country. And it does appear that there's a bit of a revival of conservative values there. And so we'll see how that plays out, because I think that there could be a lot of positive changes for Canada coming as well. And I think a relationship with a conservative administration in the US will help that. So we'll see how that goes. There's some very interesting political things happening in Canada, I think, for the benefit of most Canadians. Yeah, this is going to be fascinating to see it play out. I think that the tariffs in the short term are a little bit troubling. I think long term, this is going to be great. The third element there, we talk about the taxes being the offset to the tariffs, but we don't know what our tax burden even needs to be yet, because we don't have, Vivek and Musk are going to get in there with their Department of Government Efficiency, and they've got to slice and dice most of these government agencies that are unnecessary, and the taxes go down, because now we're running at 2/3 or half of the overall cost of government operation in theory, and which also is a massive impact on the whole tax thing. So there's a lot of stuff at play, but none of it happens fast on that side. The tariffs can happen instantaneously, right?
Yeah.
So the timing of all this is just going to be interesting. I don't wish that we have some type of economic downturn driven by tariffs and high costs and all this stuff in the meantime, while all the stuff on the back end, for the government downsize is happening. So let's just see. We'll see how that plays out. But that would be my concern, is that we're going to have to kind of fight through the tariffs and the added costs in the near term while all the other stuff's working itself out.
Yeah, good point. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts happening right now that will have an impact on them.
Right.
So definitely something for us to keep an eye on as we continue to follow this in the coming weeks and everything here.
Yeah, I'm an Excel junkie, so I would love to see an Excel model. This is maybe it'd be pretty complex, but I would love to see how kind of all those things play out, and you reduce taxes by this much, and you increase tariffs by this much, and look at the GDP coming from different places. And I would love to see all that modeled out. I'm assuming people are doing this, but I'm not privy to those conversations, unfortunately. So if anybody knows of some great financial models that show how this plays out, I would love to see that. So cool.
For sure. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next article here. So we're going to step away from the presidential, from President Trump and any nominations or anything like that, and go into the commercial real estate industry. So this article comes to us from Globe Street. The headline reads, "Banks brace for pain as CRE borrowers struggle to refinance." So reading from the article, commercial real estate has undergone major stresses and changes through and after the pandemic. That's translated to pressures and challenges ahead for lenders, says S&P Global Market Intelligence in a report about trends and opportunities shaping up for 2025. One factor is interest rates. The Federal Reserve has cut 75 basis points from the federal funds rate between the September and November meetings. That is progress for shorter term rates. If longer term rates also started to fall, it could mean good news for CRE borrowers. But yields seem to be holding above the 4.3% to 4.4% range. For many properties, particularly in the embattled types, that may not prove enough of a reduction. As S&P Global put it, bankers will feel some pain in the CRE books, especially as borrowers look to refinance and find that task increasingly harder. That seems like a safe bet given what has been happening in the markets of late. The firm's analysis of national property records found that the average interest rate on loans made in 2024 through August was 6.2%. Maturing loans, however, were an average 4.3%. Refinancing means a nearly 200 basis point increase. About $950 billion in CRE mortgages were expected to mature in 2024. The number will hit a higher number in 2027 at $1.26 trillion based on data from CoreLogic, as Globe Street previously reported. Continuing on in the article here, this is where things get more complicated. S&P Global projects that continued Fed interest rate cuts should lower the impact of higher debt service on refinancing. However, the prospect of more reductions is far less certain than many thought. Fed Chair Jerome Powell effectively pulled the punch bowl away from markets by saying in a speech at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, "The economy is not sending any signals that we need to be in a hurry to lower rates. The strength we are currently seeing in the economy gives us the ability to approach our decisions carefully. In other words, don't count on the pace number, or size of future cuts. Some property types have seen lower cash flows. Additionally, higher taxes, utilities, and insurance costs combined with higher interest rates on refinancing put additional strains on net operating income and debt service coverage ratio. Office has been the biggest concern due to hybrid work, reducing cash flows, increased expenses, and the difficulty in refinancing many properties. About 10% of the 950 billion in CRE loans maturing in 2024 are office buildings. Some will likely default and force workouts and sales. Owners of older properties may experience difficulty finding new tenants and could have to put significant capital into remodeling and upgrades, adding to fiscal strain. But S&P Global noted that banks have been increasing reserves against risk. Wells Fargo, PNC Financial Services Group, Truist Financial Corp, and Citizens Financial Group have increased reserves to 8% or more of their office portfolios. So this one, we've talked about office quite a bit, and we've talked about commercial real estate in past episodes and everything. And I think this one caught my attention because we could see a situation where many of these undesirable, office buildings and properties that are unable to get tenants are going to have to be repurposed, or they're going to end up being owned by the banks and everything, just because a 200 basis point increase in rates is going to it's going to increase the price. And especially for when you're talking about some of these groups that may hold these buildings and not having tenants and not having cash flow to be able to pay for these things, it's going to put them in some interesting spots. And I would agree. I think we've seen I don't think the rates are going to come down as fast as maybe we originally thought they were going to come down. It'll be interesting to see what happens here in December, if there is going to be another, quarter point reduction, and if that sends signals or anything. But I don't know if that's going to happen here in December. It's not something we have planned to talk about in this episode necessarily. But I guess, what are your initial thoughts of what's going to happen and play out here with some of these loans that are maturing, and what's going to happen to some of these properties?
We're just seeing the same thing that happens every round of a real estate cycle, right? So we're probably bottomed already. So we're kind of in the trough still of the real estate cycle. If you bought too high, you're in deep crap. And that just always is the way this plays out. Like when you buy too high, you can be in trouble. Or maybe you bought it right, but you didn't model your rents conservatively, and you're in Austin and rents are cratering, and you're in deep trouble. So it's like, these are things that are not new. These are issues that have happened before. It's like, this is the cycle. This is the way it goes. There will be projects that go back to the bank. This is already happening. It doesn't look like this is at a level that's like catastrophic, right? You saw some of the stuff that was happening in China and Evergrande and all that. We don't have that kind of scenario. I think, based on what I've seen, there was some concern initially that maybe we'd see a couple of large banks that had some big risk. We could even see a bank fail if they had a huge amount of real estate that was just handed back to them and they had nothing to do with it, and they had to write down these insane losses. They might be insolvent. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case, although there's going to be some banks take hits. And I think, kind of something you and I have talked about before, there's probably some office buildings in some bad locations in some urban cores that aren't in very good shape, and it doesn't financially make sense to upgrade them. And the bank's going to get them back because nobody wants to be in those buildings, and they're just going to sit there because in some cases there's just not a solution. You can't convert them because of floor plate sizes or any of the myriad different scenarios that cause those problems. So there will be things go back to the bank on the office side for sure, and there'll be some nasty ones that just sit there forever. And on the multifamily side, those are really more rent and purchase price driven. Somebody came in and bought this at the peak of the market. Rents are still going up, and they're trying to model in all of these potentialities that they might get. And then those don't happen because interest rates go up, and they didn't, maybe they didn't buy a rate cap, and now their rents are coming down, and they're not, the cap rate that they had planned doesn't exist anymore. So those multifamily projects they're in trouble, and so they're going to retrade, and somebody's going to take a big loss, and somebody's going to buy it back at the number that is probably actually worth, and then the whole thing starts over again.
Yeah, so we'll watch how this one plays out. I think it's just interesting to follow along and see. And I think, yeah, knowing that maybe it's not going to be as big of a hit, but it's still something to keep an eye on. And I think seeing the financial institutions increase their reserves is obviously something that they're trying to protect themselves against what the downside risk could be of some of the some of the loans in their own portfolios and everything. So yeah, just keeping an eye on that, seeing what the Federal Reserve does here. I think by our next episode, we should know. I think we should know what their decision was in their final meeting of the year. So that will also kind of paint a picture for what's going to happen next year, because they usually give a little bit of a projection or a look into what their plan is for 2025. So that'll be very telling with what has happened over the last few weeks since their last meeting.
Mm-hmm. This is definitely a tale of the haves and have-nots. There will be office funds and large office owners that get absolutely hammered, and then there'll be those who targeted better quality and live work play environments and well located products that are still going to be full, and they're going to be just fine. So we're going to see some ups and downs there. Some groups will be fine, some may get slaughtered.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the final article. This one comes to us from MPA. Headline reads, Trump names Scott Turner as HUD Secretary nominee. So reading from this article, President-elect Donald Trump has chosen Scott Turner, a motivational speaker and former NFL player, to lead the Department of Housing and Urban Development. If confirmed, Turner will oversee a $70 billion budget and guide a department with around 8,000 employees at a critical time when housing affordability and homelessness are pressing national issues. Turner, chair of the America First Policy Institute, previously served as executive director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council during the Trump administration. The council spearheaded the Opportunity Zones initiative, which Trump praised in his announcement, noting that under Turner's leadership, the program attracted over $50 billion in private investment. Scott will work alongside me to make America great again for every American, Trump said in his statement. Turner's selection hints at a focus on community development and a departure from current federal housing strategies. While specific plans remain unclear, his alignment with conservative think tanks like the America First Policy Institute suggested an emphasis on tackling homelessness through reforms addressing mental health, substance abuse, and deregulation of local housing markets. Turner brings a unique mix of experience to the role. Following a 9-year NFL career with teams like the Washington Redskins and the Denver Broncos, he served in the Texas House of Representatives from 2013 to 2017. His work as executive director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council during Trump's first term allowed him to shape community-focused investment initiatives. While his views on HUD's broader programs remain unknown, his leadership style is likely to reflect his history of combining private investment with community development efforts. So this is the article that kind of came in later in the week with that announcement, and so we added this one to this episode here. Also, just noting that he was in the Texas House of Representatives, as it says here in this article, was something that also caught my attention. I don't know a whole lot about him as far as like his approach and strategy. I do think it's a good sign that he has some experience with Trump's prior administration, being involved in it and everything. And I think, from your perspective, Charles, what are your thoughts on this move? Does it seem, I guess, at face value, like a good move? And what should we be looking for?
I don't know him personally, but we're kind of in the same circle in the development space in Dallas Fort Worth. So he lives in Dallas Fort Worth. He represented Frisco, which is where I live. He represented Frisco in the Texas House, and he works with JPI now, which is the largest multifamily developer in DFW. So definitely development ties. Definitely very big on opportunity zones. All things which are good, I think, for development. So if I were in development right now, in making recommendations, I would say definitely look at the opportunity zone programs, because I think those are probably going to stay and expand. This is an Obama era thing that Scott is a particular fan of, and I think will probably work really hard to keep pushing that. Overall, it seems like he's very well liked, seems very capable, and probably an excellent pick. I like the fact that he has Texas ties, development ties. I would be surprised if he made decisions that would hurt the things that he's been close to. So generally, seems like a pretty good pick.
Does it seem like he's someone that will be relatively easily confirmed? I know there's been some picks that there's questions whether they're going to make, they're going to make it through the
Yeah,
confirmation process.
this will be a walk in the park. There's not going to be there's nothing they're going to come up with. That's going to be able to push this one. Yeah, so I think he'll be easily confirmed. Maybe one of the easier ones, at least based on what I've heard.
All right, well, good deal. Yeah, I think we'll keep an eye on some of these confirmations and everything that are going to be coming up, and just any other selections that may be made that may have an impact. I know we're looking at some of the more local level bills and that are going to be pushed through in different states, especially focusing in on Texas, and looking at some of the things that are going to be coming up there as session starts in 2025. So odd number years are in session, and so we'll be looking at some of that as well. Because I think, although at the federal level, we're going to have certain programs and things that will have an impact. Looking at the state and local levels is probably where there's going to be a much bigger impact on how to reduce some of the friction that developers experience with doing projects and everything like that. So seeing some of those bills come through more at the state level is going to be something we're going to follow as well. On this show, as we start to see some of that happen in January, once different states get back into session and everything. So
Yeah, and I was going to tag on and add to that. I was at the Texas Builders Association meeting, and Texas Association of Builders. I'm sorry, and just going over. They're putting together their plan for this next legislative session, and the members and people that are on committees like I am, we're just making recommendations, and they're talking through like, what is the plan? What's the push? What are we going to do? We'll have a legislative day in Austin. I'll be in Austin in February for that and meet with a bunch of representatives. I think there are a lot more ways for us to have meaningful impact on a state level. And a lot of these things are designed. I mean, that's just the way it's set up. It's not supposed to be a federal government thing, a lot of the development stuff that we do. So it's supposed to be state level regulated, and that's really by design. So a lot of things happening in Texas, and housing, both affordability and development ease, and removing the regulatory red tape, like that. These are massive pushes in the state capitol, and will be for this next session. So it's a lot happening in Texas, and I think in other states as well. So a lot more to come on that, and we'll be following it very closely.
Very cool. All right. Well, that brings us to a close of this episode. Thank you all, as always, for listening in. I know since we're just past Thanksgiving, I mentioned being grateful for things. And I know I said this at the beginning of episode 52 when we hit the 1 year mark on the show and everything. But, the show wouldn't be possible without all of you listening in and giving us feedback and everything. And so just really appreciate all of you. Again, whether you joined us from the beginning or you found us along the way at some point in those episodes, just again, super grateful for all of you listening in and making the show a reality and everything. So with that said, we will call it a show, and we will talk to you next week. Thank you.
Bye-bye.